Go on and get started. I'm Gail Strange, Director of Church and Mid-Council Communications, and I want to thank all of you for joining us. My cohort, Dee Decker, and I work on these events quarterly, but I also want to remind you that we are also doing customized workshops. So if you have a desire for a workshop for your presbytery, please feel free to contact me, and we will then be able to work with you in scheduling something just expressly for the churches in your presbytery. That is in addition to the quarterly workshops that we will do. I also want to talk very briefly about some things that are going on here. We have just recently, Dee and the social media whiz that she is, has started a new Facebook group for the Presbyterian Communicators Network. And I don't think it's a week old, is it, Dee?
I think it's just a week old, and we have just under 200 members already. So I'm going to put in the chat, if you are not already a member of the Communicators Network Facebook group, that is the link for you to join. There's I think there's 3 questions that we ask you just to get a little background information. By joining that group, that provides a safe place for us to collaborate and have conversations about any challenges you might have as a church communicator. Every week I do a Monday Minute. In 60 seconds or less, I give you a tip to help you in your communication initiatives. I'm starting a video series on communication strategy and the components of that. A communication social media strategy, what is it? Why should you have one? And what platforms you should be on, all kinds of stuff. So we hope that this is a place where you guys can come together and form deeper relationships and really work together across the PCUSA as communicators.
You will find all of this information on the Communicators Network site, along with a recording of today's presentation and the two previous quarterly presentations are there, as well as handouts and things that have gone along with those presentations. So there is a plethora of information on the Communicators Network website for you, and we just thank you for joining us. I would like to introduce our presenter for the day, and that's Mr. Randy Hobson. And Randy brings years of expertise of photography and videography. He's actually with the Office of the General Assembly, and he does all the videos for the General Assembly, and you will see the ones from our stated clerk, the various videos that are produced and that he talks on. Those are all done by Randy. And so Randy has a great deal of knowledge on live streaming and videography. And so we want to share this with you. And once Randy is done with his presentation, I have the questions that you all ask. And anything that Randy doesn't touch on, we will ask him those questions, and he may or may not have an answer, but I'm sure he can get one for you.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys. So I want to do this workshop. You don't need to spin big to have a big impact. I know it was billed primarily as a live stream discussion, and I was prepared to do that, but the more I thought about it, I thought, you know, it's been more than a year since the pandemic started. We closed our church doors. You guys are either doing it already or maybe wanting to begin cutting back on that soon. So we're going to cover that. But I wanted to cover some other things that I hope will be useful to you guys. So I added on a little more about outreach and storytelling. And at the end, I'll cut this presentation off and show you how the sausage is made in here, so to speak. I've got my equipment laid out to show you the kind of different levels of stuff I use. I started with the Office of the General Assembly in 2009. I used to work on the website, and then most of you know that websites started becoming kind of automated, like WordPress sites and things like that. And I was copy and pasting my work that used to take me 40 hours a week in like an hour. So they bought me a camera. But anyway, things kept growing, and this is, you can see some of the outdoor work I do here. In the Office of the General Assembly, we're a team of 3. There's a director of communications, and you probably can't see my mouse, but I'm wiggling it over Rick Jones right there. Most of you probably know him. So in these are some of the outdoor activities. This is like run and gun stuff, you know. So I've got some equipment that my top of the line is kind of the bottom of the top of the line. It's a documentary style camera and gear that we use that's really portable and has just the right amount of features. You probably aren't going to shoot films on it, maybe some kind of indie budget or something. You can see that in a couple of these pictures. We're doing a rally, some interviews with the clerk at the border wall, and here I am pointing my cell phone to live stream an immigration rally at GA 223 in St. Louis. But all these things have been effective, from, you know, my best camera down to my cell phone. And of course, you know, we are a national office, so we have an indoor studio on the bottom left there. We post the clerk up in here where I'm sitting right now. I'm getting toasted by these studio lights. It was probably not the best decision since I've got a half hour to spend with you here. You know, we have permanent setups for the clerk's office to have discussions about matters around the church. I do a lot of worship recordings, a lot of sermons. Diane Moffat's there in the top right. You see I've got one camera and a light on her to shoot her sermon. You know, it's not real complicated. But so that's what our indoor work looks like. So here's the things I want to cover. We want to talk about worship setups and outreach and storytelling and equipment software, like I kind of mentioned a little while ago. Now, I know everybody has figured out some way to worship at this point, all different kinds of levels. On your left there, that is the 224th General Assembly that we live streamed here in the Presbyterian Center. I don't know how many of you caught it, but this is kind of what backstage at the General Assembly looks like anywhere. The difference this year was the addition of the interactive PC biz with Zoom and integrating all those things together. But this level of equipment is there all the time. That's top end, top of the line. This is probably what the room that did the NFL draft looked like when they did it virtually this year. So similar equipment, using all the same things, but there are pieces inside that room that you can pluck out for under a couple $1,000s and live stream a 2 to 4 camera worship service if that's what you're interested in doing, if you're wanting to upgrade your process or anything. And on the right is our former director of communications, Miss Sharon Youngs. I had to scroll through 3 million pictures to find this one of her duct taping her cell phone to a music stand there, and that was her first recorded worship service. And they've probably since, you know, improved their process, but you know, she got it done. She got the message out, and that's what I really want to impress on folks, is that you've got to communicate, and there's only a couple rules to follow if you want to just continue to communicate with your people and get the things done you need to get done. So the first question I want everybody to ask themselves about any event, if any event that you want, that somebody says we need to live stream it. It's been a pretty new toy for a while, and a lot of times we live stream things we don't need to. If you can record worship on a Wednesday and edit it together on a free piece of software, and then host like a Facebook watch party, or somebody share their screen on Zoom, Vimeo, you know, you can do all these things on a pre-recorded service, and then the participants can focus on the interaction that'll happen during the worship service. You know, you can real-time talk with the pastor while they're delivering their sermon at the same time. So I just think, you know, pre-recorded takes out a lot of the technical issues that you're going to have with live streaming. So if you can do it, you should try to do it. So with a live stream, you're going to need maybe a couple cameras if you have a musician section and a stage in the front. And we'll get into more of that in a minute, but it helps you with copyright issues. If you find out, if you get your worship edited on Friday, I saw somebody on Facebook said they wanted to know about working on copyright. Now, that's not really the kind of thing I work with, and I saw that Dee put some suggestions on there. Well, I'm the blue collar guy. You know, I kind of do what I'm told, and I set everything up, and somebody comes over and says, you need to cut that song. So to give you a chance to just cut out the songs that you can't get the copyright that somebody's working on. You can add titles and text easier, put some transparent graphics over top of things. If you pre-record it, you can integrate your projection with the worship services happening the same way you would in person, having both those in there. But most importantly, I think, is focus on the interaction. So this is what a pre-recorded service can look like. I believe this was Easter, and this is Reverend Diane Moffat's husband. He is a phenomenal trumpet player. That's not what we're here to talk about, though. Mm-hmm. So this is what it can look like. This is a professional piece of software. You don't have to buy the subscription for this. There's a free software that does most of the things that you would need to do with this here. So I started experimenting with my phone. Now, I have an iPhone, and iPhone records HD video in a fully automatic way. The only thing you have to consider is light, and that you need to zoom with your feet. Don't zoom with your phone. But I was checking out the simple iMovie program, and then kind of threw the stuff together. You lengthen and shorten clips and drop them in there together. And this is my wonderful family for a stay-at-home lake week or something. But you can add an audio track underneath. You can accomplish a lot of the things that other fairly expensive Adobe software can provide, just with some limitations. Now, maybe people don't want to be pre-recorded, and that's fine. So if you're using a camera that has the appropriate outputs, Nikon DSLR cameras have these, anything that has SDI or HDMI output. Now, SDI is the round circular connector right there, and HDMI, they're kind of labeled, but I don't know if it's big enough for you to read. You'll notice that this box also has a number 1 and number 2 on the face of it. This is called the Blackmagic Web Presenter, and it will switch between 2 cameras, and it converts the video signal into a signal that your computer can read. So it acts as an external webcam. So if you've got an old Sony HD cam or something, and you want to zoom in and out and then put it on tripod and rotate it around while you're recording worship, you can use 2 cameras with this setup, $365. And it kind of ups your game quite a bit. Now, this is for going live. Back when we were looking at a General Assembly picture, one of those boxes in there is cram-packed with like 20 of these. You can chain these things together, and then you get all these different input options, okay? And then through a piece of software that they use, they control all those different things. So you can scale this up and down. You know, if you're starting with your phone, you got your worship done, you say, hey, you know what, let's try to do 2 cameras. Let's put $1,000 into this thing, buy a couple used cameras. And you start using this thing. You're looking for a camera that has the appropriate outputs. Canon DSLR cameras do not have an output. Now, the DSLR cameras I'm talking about that shoot video. So if you're going to jump to 2, you can use this. They make one that has 4 inputs, and you can see on the back there, it's got all those places to plug all these things in. It's got that nice color waveform on there. It's a little bit more, $13.58 for this one. I haven't even used this because we just chained together the smaller ones, the Blackmagic web presenters. So that is to say that your setup probably would look something like this. If you go from cell phone to a 2-camera setup. So you've got a stage area, communion table, maybe some musicians over here. That's pretty much your basic church service presentation setup. I've got everything labeled here. Your computer connected to the Blackmagic web presenter, and you've got each camera running into that. So just going from 2 operators minimum, 3 here, and you can scale this up to as much as you want to. I was looking at the introductions on the Facebook page, and the first person who identified their church that I found easily was First Presbyterian Bethlehem. And so I went in and I watched some of your worship service, and it's really well done. There's numerous camera angles. I think there was at least 2 different angles on the pastor. They were switching back and forth between people remotely reading scripture, and the point is to say that these things are going to grow as much as you need it to. You can just keep adding pieces to it. And that's the nice thing about me recommending these particular items, is that you can take baby steps. You can go from a cell phone to 1 camera that you run through your machine as a stream to 2 cameras. You can run a computer into that web presenter if you want to run like a PowerPoint, at the same time, the same way you would project it at worship. But you don't have to do that. You can put your camera on a stand and duct tape it to there and do whatever you got to do. So that said, that's all well and good. People will forgive you for bad video, but the issues that you really are going to run into doing worship in your church space, the issues for me have always been setting up at different churches, lighting, first audio, because the echo and everything gets this mumbled sound. Now, this is a set that I bought a while back. On the left, that is, those are called lavalier microphones. I'm sure most of you know what that is. But it's a little clip-on microphone, and it runs down through your shirt, clips on your belt. But if you can get a good audio out of your pastor and your musicians separately in different places, they both run into the same receiver. And that receiver has a cable that comes out, plugs into your iPhone. You can also use it on a camera that has a 3.8 millimeter jack, or a headphone jack. This was a really nice find for me. It was really inexpensive. $239 is unheard of for a reliable wireless microphone. It has numerous channels in case you're getting interference. Just set it up, test it out if you want. But increasing your audio is huge. I don't know if you guys watched on the Blair Witch Project, and the entire movie is really terrible footage, just from like a homemade camera. But the audio production was so good that you didn't really think about that when you were watching the movie. It had great sound, the voice actors, and the music and everything. So if you can get really good sound, it's going to make up for a lot. And I think $239 to up your game that much really is a bargain. And as far as lighting, I found these really inexpensive sets here. I'm essentially using that right now to light myself. I've got 2 boxes, and if I wanted, you can add a third. And this is the last part of live worship, and I'll let you all ask some questions if you got any. But I can add a third light in the back and black light and separate someone from the background in different ways. The state clerk popped into the office a couple weeks ago to send a message to the Presbyterian Church of North Korea, and he came in wearing his black collar, black shirt with the white collar, and his black suit coat, and this is all black back here. So that's why I had that light set up today, just to pop that out of there. But that's just adding a third light. You can do things like that. The important thing is when you're trying not to spend a whole lot of money, focus on the fundamentals. Have good sound. Learn how to do the lighting. There's plenty of YouTube videos and stuff out there. Learn how to do 3-point lighting. It's not that complicated, and you just set it up and move it around. If you go ahead, don't not buy it because you're afraid you won't get it. You'll figure it out. Set it up, move it around, see how it goes. And then the microphones, it's the same kind of thing. Oh, shoot. Oh, Lightworks. Lightworks is a completely free software. You sign up on their website. They send it to you, and it does, you can edit individual video clips together. It accepts the crazy format that high-end professional cameras will give you. You don't get like an MOV that you can play on your computer that way. Yeah, it was a really nice program. You can switch out audio and add graphics and stuff to the top. I'm roasting up your time here. I'm sorry. Let's see.
Here's another question. With no wired internet access, how can the church live stream?
Yeah, I have a hotspot on my phone that actually works if it's in a place where I get good reception. No wired internet. You can do the live stream straight from your cell phone with those microphones. That will still probably push it through and get the job done. I would strongly consider pre-recording worship if that was the case, though, because I've been just burned so many times by Wi-Fi in a church. It happens all the time, and I really try to avoid it. I bring huge Cat 5 cables to try to come from their network box and bring it all the way out to the sanctuary to use. So iMovie, cheap alternative. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say there was another question. How to guide, and Dee and I will interject the answers that we know here as well. How to guide church leaders who don't see the importance of live streaming after the pandemic. And that is almost a phenomenon in and of itself, because anyone who does not see the value of live streaming after what we've gone through may not ever see it. And so now the good thing about online service is that once you post this stuff on your website or wherever you post your material, people can view your information and they can view your services at any time. It doesn't necessarily have to be just on that Sunday. So you get that advantage with people, looking at your services at different times. And so we're here in Louisville, Kentucky, and we've had people from Texas, Delaware, as far away as South Africa and England and Korea viewing our church service. So any pastor that does not see the advantage to live streaming, you just need to just help them understand that we're no longer going to be able to do church the way we've always done it. There's going to have to be some kind of hybrid of online service and in-person service. And the more people right now, I think through online services, churches are probably reaching more people than they would have ever had in their building. So
can I hop in here real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So to the question about how to, what to say to pastors or congregational members who are pushing back against live stream, one thing that I would say is that if we are a people who believe in the power of the Spirit and that the Spirit moves and goes wherever it wants to, why are we saying that the Spirit will only move in a church building? There are hundreds of thousands of folks who, for a variety of reasons, cannot come to a building. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they've been traumatized by the church or hurt by the church. Maybe they are on vacation. Maybe, who knows the reasons why folks cannot maybe come to service in person. And by saying to folks, you have to join us at this building at this time, in this place, then we are limiting our reach of potential folks who need or want to hear the good news of Christ. And so I would say if pastors don't understand the thing that they, in my experience as a former pastor and now somebody who works with social media and live streaming, they will understand the needs of the people, and they will understand their calling to make disciples. And, you know, Jesus did not stay in a building. He left that temple and he went out into the streets. And so this is our 21st century means of reaching others. So, you know, we can have a deeper conversation about that. That is my point of passion. That's why I'm in social media and do what I do, is because I believe that it is the vehicle of the 21st century that the church is long overdue in embracing and adapting.
Yeah. And if you think about the Apostle Paul, he used, you know, what he had available to him and the culture to communicate. You know, so it's just like Dee said, there's no way that we can really reach everybody through the four walls. And if we've learned anything from this pandemic, I think it's that we have to do church a new way, and that we can no longer just stay behind the four walls and expect people to come to us.
All right, outreach. You need to share what you're doing. I find that this part of our discussion today is probably more relevant, more important, because like I said, I think you guys are very likely have already been doing worship. And hopefully I gave you some tips on upgrading your worship if you decide that's what you want to do. But I kind of mentioned earlier about how your audio is more important than your video, by using the film as an example. Good video is good, right? But good audio is even better. The other concept you might want to understand is composition. There are two basic rules that if you figure them out as far as video and photo composition. And one is the rule of thirds, and that's where you break this box into thirds here and here, and you'll see that the way I'm sitting, that my eyes are sitting on the top third of my screen here. That's where your pastor's eyes or your subject's eyes should be when you're shooting an interview or recording that person. If you see other things you'll put on these thirds, the horizon behind the church, if you can get it on this third when you're doing your composition. If you can remember that rule, the rule of thirds, and the other one is like the golden mean, and it's this kind of swirly thing. You'll have to look that up for yourself, because there's hours and hours and hours and hours of theory and discussion on that. But if you just do the rule of thirds, you're gonna be doing pretty good. Lighting. So I showed you those boxes earlier. Sometimes you don't need both. You can often get away with one. When I was taught to use lighting and set it up, it was suggested that stronger features, maybe on an older male, you would shadow part of the face, and that you might light both sides of a woman's face. That's an extremely outdated and possibly sexist way of framing it now. But think of the situation you're in and who you're interviewing and what you want to convey with that, with your lighting. But all that is more important than the camera. Like I said, that phone in your hand shoots HD video. We've done 3 full-length documentaries, and one of them played at an IMAX here at a film festival, and that iPhone footage looked great. So when you're going out doing a story about the farmers market that you're having at your church, you know, if you walk around with your cell phone and have a little microphone option, you're going to get some good stories. Somebody told me that the best camera to have is the one you have on you at the time when something cool happens. And that's the truth. So don't discount that cell phone of yours, especially, I mean, the iPhone is really good. And like I said, it looked great on that huge IMAX theater. I was really terrified when I found out it was going to play in there, but it looked great. The other phones are even better. The non-Apple branded phones, my parents have another brand, something else, but their pictures are stunning. This was shot on an iPhone using iMovie.
When Dolly hears the sound of drums up, she jumps and she hollers, here I come. When Dolly hears the sound of drums up, she jumps and she hollers, here I come. And
I was thinking for a second, why did I put that in there?
she's gonna dance, she's gonna sing, she's gonna cause the rafters to ring. Ha! Woo! Stop her when she hears the call, Dolly Dong gonna have herself.
The things I was hoping you would notice in that is that some of the techniques I tried to employ with using a cell phone. Remember I said to zoom with your feet with a cell phone. But I got shots that were this close, and I got shots that were far away and wide. I changed the speed of some of the clips to match up with the music, and I cut on the action and matched it up with breaks in the song. And if you're making an exciting video from a youth camp or something you guys have going on, those are some basic techniques that everybody uses to create a mood and a feel and a flow that feels natural. Back to the microphones. So I mentioned like you're going out and telling a story about something your Presbyterian is doing. So when I bought, I don't get paid by this company or anything. When I bought this set, that little stand that you see the receiver on, you put that in there and then it clips your phone in with it. So you're holding that stick. I can't believe I didn't bring the stick, but you're holding that stick and it's got the receiver and the phone on it, and it's all one rig, and you can walk around and, you know, capture your video in a good lavalier audio.
Yeah, I did have some questions on outreach in the chat that said that their pastor did not want to see tripods and cameras, did not want them to be visible, and so they're having problems with they're having to use wall-mounted cameras. And again, in the conversation that I had with my pastor today, one of the things that he just told me was that he will no longer just be talking to the people in the pews because of what's going on. His audience is going to be, he's talking to the camera because that's where the audience is. It's beyond just the people in the pews. And so I don't know how you're going to help your pastor to understand that, you know, things have moved so far beyond just the people in the pew, and that we really need to do what we can do to share the message and the good news with those who are not in the pews listening. And so we want the best quality, you want the best angles, you want the best pictures, you want the best lightings, so that your best image and the best information can come forward very clearly, can be very well lit, and is a good production. Another question was how to include more people in creating the technology, in creating during your live stream. How do you include the community beyond your congregation? Again, you've got to let people know what you're doing, and that might be through social media. First of all, they've got to know that you're live streaming and that you're doing something different. That might be information that you want to put on your website.
During the live stream itself, I would highly recommend that you have dedicated volunteers that are monitoring your chat function that are putting in links where people can, if they have a prayer request, that they can fill out prayer request forms, where they can fill out visitor forms, where they can be invited to have chats with the pastors after the service in a Facebook room or a Zoom meeting. I would recommend that you have folks that are, again, dedicated to helping the people who are watching digitally feel like they are just as important and just as much a part of the community as those people who are there physically. There has to be a shift that happens where we begin to understand that one is not better than the other. And so one way of doing that is this radical digital hospitality. If John Johnson, sorry, John, you were just the first name I looked over and saw. If John Johnson comes on, then you type, "Hey, John, we're so glad you're here this morning. We're going to be discussing whatever the sermon title is. Here's a link to drop your information if you want to be contacted by a pastor or have a prayer request. We'll be here throughout the service if you have any questions or need anything from us." And then, do that for everybody who watches. Welcome them, just like you have somebody standing at the door saying hello and passing out a bulletin. Put a link up to your digital bulletin. These are all things that we need to be thinking through and how to make digital worship just as inviting and just as welcoming as physical worship.
Randy, let me ask you, is there a way to train non-tech people to do this?
Wow.
How easy
sure,
is that?
Yeah. I mean, everybody can learn how to do some level of it, right? So if you're in a situation where you're effectively trying to convince someone who doesn't want to use technology to run a live stream, then you should just go with the easiest route. The easiest route is for them to hold their cell phone, open the Facebook page, sit in the front row, and hold it still. And then they'll start to learn more as they do it. But the important part is to communicate with your people, to share the message. And so I think just start slow. Do something, and then once they get used to it, people will naturally begin to look into it more, or they will, you'll be able to point them in the direction of things and start taking baby steps forward to do more.
And don't throw somebody into a 2-camera live with a control board kind of mix without several weeks of training and them shadowing. And here's something that I have learned in my experiences with volunteers running live streams. Some people will freeze. We would have 4 weeks of training, and then we would have 4 weeks of shadowing, and then we would let them go live. And some people who were great during all of that, as soon as they knew that it was live, froze up. So this is not something that you want to throw a complicated mix towards somebody, but Randy's absolutely right. Anybody can shoot with an iPhone or an iPad and make it happen.
I'd like to add something about worship, though. The clerk and I spend an awful lot of time together, and in casual conversation recently, we've talked a little bit about, obviously, worship is very important to what you do. But we also talked about how important it is for us to share the community engagement that happens in our congregations. If you're, hosting food drives and doing stuff like that, that's worship too, and that's church too. So I just want to leave that thought out there. What is the least expensive camera to use that gives good video? Your cell phone. It's an easy question. It is literally HD video, as long as you don't zoom in and it's clean.
So Randy, can you tell people how to set their cell phone to HD? It defaults to that. I don't think you can even change this stuff. What about Androids? Are Androids just as compatible for doing this kind of work, Randy?
Android has an even better camera options. Some of the Android-based cameras. Android is the operating system, but some of the non-iPhone cameras are even better than the iPhone with photo and video.
Say from my experience in doing worship services live streamed, you want to be sure that you have a very strong internet upload and download speeds. You need to check both of those. And you want to be sure, if at all possible, to not run it through your Wi-Fi. You can, but it's not nearly as stable as if you're using, a Cat5 cable. If you have, a couple of cameras and you're live streaming and, your rig is getting bigger and bigger, the first thing that you want to do is check out what your internet speed is, because that can affect how quickly that live stream is getting uploaded to Facebook and that sort of thing.
Randy, another question that came across was a question about dealing with large church sanctuary windows that create backlighting problems. Any suggestions?
Oh, yeah, you have to have a stronger light in front of the subject than what's coming in behind it, or you have to cover that in some way. It depends on what your framing is, but if you are fairly close, they sell like a thing that folds into a circle. It pops out into a big circle that will kind of screen light for you. I think I've got one. I don't know how much time we've got, but it's like this. It's just a reflector. But yeah, you have to manually have somebody. I mean, you can buy stands and stuff for them to do stuff like that. The other cheap piece of equipment is like cargo shorts, right? Carry all your mics and batteries and stuff in there and extra cards. Dad shorts.
Any other questions?
Thank you, everybody, for
Randy.
having me. I'm just really grateful to spend some time. Any day's a good day to spend time with Presbyterians. And it's just good to be here with everyone.
Randy, do you want to repeat your email address so that people can contact you with questions?
Sure. It's randy.hobson. It's H-O-B as in Bravo, S-O-N. Randy.hobson@peaceusa.org. Melody Smith just